Hello, thank you so much for watching. Elise makes a bunch of videos. So today I just want to talk a little bit about the difference between compassion and empathy. So recently, I think it came up when I was watching probably Joe Rogan and Jordan Peterson. Made a couple of vlogs based on that podcast right there. But anyways, they had brought it up, and I think generally, even myself, the assumption is that like empathy is always a good thing. But I think a lot of people mistake the fact that empathy on its own is always helpful. I mean, the first point that I think they made also is the example of like the overbearing, like mama bear syndrome, where it's like you're so empathetic to the people that you care about, usually like your family, your country, or whatever, that you are now being violent towards whoever else may or may not be threatening those people that you care about. So this kind of thing outside of the animal kingdom can be sort of summed up in like preemptive strike type situations, or these wars that people are starting in order to defend their own country, defend freedom or whatever. That's the sort of jargon that people are using. And it's supposed to be somehow protecting your own people, right? So you're basically taking priority of the people that you know and care about, and hurting or killing those who may or may not threaten those people. In some cases, it's very like real, the wars that have happened in history and that are happening currently or recently. You can just say, like, you can see that like some of them, they're using that reasoning, but it doesn't really actually make any sense when you think about it. So it's just kind of this blind empathy thing where people are saying, oh, but we're doing this to protect ourselves and we're doing this to protect freedom or whatever. So that is like the sort of mama bear empathy sort of thing where you're trying to use this positive idea in order to justify doing horrible things. So that in itself, it's pretty bad, and it's very misleading and very sort of like it's all this propaganda, obviously. So that's the one point. And then the other point, which is more like the thing that concerns me, and I think is more of like something to think about as individuals, is this idea that being empathetic towards people who have less than you in itself is good. Okay, so I see this a lot because I travel a lot. I've worked and traveled in a lot of really impoverished places, and I know a lot of people who are like, how can you go there? Like, how can you see those people? Like, I see these people who have nothing, they're poor, and like, oh, it just makes me feel horrible. And so I think when that kind of discussion happens, what's happening in the mind of those who don't want to see people who are impoverished, which is like most of the planet, most of the humans that occupy the planet Earth are like pretty poor compared to like, say, myself or pretty much any other like Canadian or American, even the poorest ones. And I'm thinking like, oh, but there's poor people in America and Canada, and like, what about all these other people who are impoverished? Yes, but even those most desperate impoverished people in Canada are still better off than a lot of the people around the globe. So put that in perspective, and then just this idea that like, I don't want to see that. It'll make me feel bad, right? It'll make me feel empathy, right? But the point there is that when you do see it, if you do see poverty in your own country or abroad or wherever, are you just like, oh, I feel sad for that person and have pity on them, but with no actual action of any kind to help, right? So you feeling bad for somebody, it's like, even on a one-to-one, forget this whole like nation versus nation, but on a one-to-one basis, I think anyone who's ever had like a major accident, like say you broke your leg or like something where your mobility is like really impaired, then when people are like, oh my God, that must really be horrible. Wow, I feel like really like bad for you. And like, does that make the person feel better? You being like, oh wow, that situation sucks. I see that you have a shitty time with that. No, you're probably making the person feel worse. Like me personally, if I'm like sick or I've had an injury or whatever, and people are like, oh man, oh look at you, oh that's too bad, but they're not actually offering any help. They're just like pointing out the fact that like, oh, you're shitty right now, cool. Like, no, that is not helpful to anyone. It's the opposite of helpful. It's like detrimental, right? So that is the sort of attitude that it always bothered me, but I couldn't quite put like what it was that was wrong with it. But now I'm just like, you know what it is? It's just like the difference between empathy and compassion. So if you see something in another individual where it's like, oh wow, you've got this problem, instead of just like saying, oh wow, I agree that you have a shitty situation, that's too bad, end of story. Like, you can do something about it. It doesn't even need to be like anything like financial. It doesn't have to do with like spending days and days volunteering for whatever. Like, just saying like, hey, is there anything I can do? Like, you know, like just being there for them and letting them know that like you're willing to help, and that's it. So be compassionate, not empathetic. That's sort of my thing for today. So hopefully you enjoyed. Comment, like, subscribe, share, whatever. Peace and love, y'all.